Hello, my name's David, and I make maps. Well, that may not sound very pertinent or even very exciting for this sort of environment. It was very pertinent and it was very exciting in May when I introduced myself for two different presentations at a homeschool education conference. So my wife and I have 6 children, and 4 of them are school age from 1st to 6th grade. And we homeschool them, and it's a lot of work, and it's a challenge, but it's a joyful challenge. It allows us to really craft the curriculum and the education and adapt the learning the way that we want, like road tripping to Montreal so Daddy can come to a conference while they enjoy the interest of a new country and a new place. My wife has attended a homeschool education conference for the past several years, and she usually comes home pretty excited with new curriculum, new hope for the coming year, and new ideas. But a lot of those sessions that she would go to focused around what might be termed core subjects in math or in English, with the occasional throw-in of personal development or fine arts or something like that. And so I asked her last year if she thought a geography-related presentation would be interesting and beneficial in the conference. And she said that would be really great. And so did several of her other homeschool friends. And so I found myself in May at the Latter-day Saint Home Educators Conference in Williamsburg, Virginia, presenting 2 presentations. One was a presentation to middle and high school students, so teenagers, and the other was to the actual adults or educators in the room. And so what I wanted to share today was a little bit of what I shared with them, as well as what we've done with our own children in including the power of maps in a pre-college education. And I really appreciate Carl and Mike and most of you who are involved in the college level education. And I've done that as well in the past. But right now, the focus has been on teaching our children and pre-college in the homeschool environment. So for teaching teens, what I did when 45 minutes with them was to use maps to teach them critical thinking. And how do we do that? Well, we turn to Dr. Monmanier's wonderful book, How to Lie with Maps. And so I termed my talk, How Maps Lie, try to bring in the teenagers with a little bit of interest. I focused on 3 specific parts of the map, and this comes straight from How to Lie with Maps. The first is projection, the second is scale, and the third is symbolization. And I included several interactive exercises with them to let them know that there are things that happen with maps that they may not even know about or think about, and they don't really have a whole lot of control over it. The cartographer has the control, but they have the power to think about what's going on and how to interpret it. So for the first exercise, I had them draw a line of the shortest distance possible between Williamsburg, where they were, and Rome, which was a random spot I chose in Europe, which was roughly a similar latitude. But I gave them this Mercator projection with both spots marked on the map, and I said, go ahead, draw a line of the shortest distance between these 2 cities. And as you might imagine, most of them drew that line. And then I said, well, that was good, but the actual shortest distance between Williamsburg and Rome is this line. And so I taught them about projections. I taught them how there are different types of projections, and the way that the 3D space, the 3D Earth, is projected onto a 2D plane is going to change different aspects, and you're going to have things like distance or shape or area distorted based on which projection you choose. To emphasize the fact, I gave them each a balloon. I put them in pairs. I gave them a balloon and a Sharpie, which I know was very trusting of me with teenagers, but I did it anyway. And they blew up the balloon, and I had them draw a face on it. So they enjoyed that, and then I had them take all the air out of the balloon, and we had a conversation about what was different. Did anything change between what you drew in the 3-dimensional space on the balloon and once the balloon was flat back on your desk, how did it look different, and how can we think critically about the way things change depending on how you look at it. The second aspect that we talked about was scale. And for scale, this was a religious-based conference, and so I was comfortable having them draw a map from their house to their church, and we had a discussion about it. Most of the maps were a box for their house, a couple lines for the roads, and then a box labeled church or something like that. And we had a discussion, and I had several of them present, and I said, well, are there no trees between your house and the church? How come you didn't put those? Are there no dogs that live between your house and the church? Are there no sidewalks? Or any number of things that you could have chosen to put on that map, but you didn't. And so we had a discussion about scale, and that there was a selection process or even a generalization process. They simplified the road network. There was probably all sorts of bends and turns that you just made a couple of straight lines, and why did you do that? And so I used this map that I had made for a Mormon historic site in Ohio to show this distance between two different places of that historic site. And I said, well, there are a lot of things that go on in those white areas of the map that I didn't show because they're not pertinent to the person that's using the map. So anytime you are looking at a map, whether it's online or in the newspaper or a magazine or a textbook, you have to think about what did the cartographer include and what did the cartographer not include and why. And the third thing was symbolization. I gave them just a basic map of Virginia, and I said, mark on the map where Williamsburg is. And so most of them put a star or a dot or something where Williamsburg was. That I said, well, if we go outside, can you show me that star or that circle that's on the ground? And of course, they couldn't. And so we talked about the importance of symbolization, how data is big, thanks, Mike, and you have to classify it in some way or simplify it in some way. And often that data is classified into groups. So take a road network, and you could have groups based on the capacity of traffic that road could handle. You could group it also by whether or not you have to pay to drive on that road or not. And so I showed them this map legend from Rand McNally. Carl, this is straight from Rand McNally's Road Atlas. And I don't know how many they've sold either. But we bought one last year. And then showed them this map of Williamsburg, and I said, you don't get to choose whether or not Rand McNally said that this was a major road or a highway or a secondary road or not. You are at the whim of the cartographer, but you have to be able to think critically about whether that was an appropriate decision or not for the context in which you are in. And so those are kind of the basic questions. Does the projection make sense? Does the data best help us understand the map, and why is it symbolized in this way? Now for the educators, what I wanted them to know is that geography isn't just memorizing states and capitals or countries and capitals or the rivers of Africa or something like that. And so I introduced the old 5 themes of geography and talked about place and location as being important and foundational, but other things like human-environment interaction or movement, and shared with them how all these things are probably already integrated well into the things that they're talking about. I talked about the how maps lie concept that I went over with the teens, and basically wanted them to know on a higher level what I shared with them. But then, more importantly, probably what they were interested more in is what did we do in our home in terms of teaching geography and having a strong geographic foundation. So I will do that with you. So this is our 10-year-old daughter, and she is posing for the camera, studying the globe. And so what have we done? I break it down into 3 different categories. The first is computer resources, which are huge. We love this site called worksheetworks.com. I have no idea what their algorithm is, but they have maps that you can generate for pretty much every country in the world, every state, and every province in Canada. And they're labeling maps, or they are how to research and find. And so our 8-year-old son has really enjoyed these and endeavored to complete every state of the United States. And so he actually finished this on Thursday, the day before we started our road trip up here to Montreal. He has now completed every state, as well as a couple other countries and provinces, And so here he is working. He has the road atlas out, and sometimes he has to grab the world atlas and compare and contrast different things to find city locations, mountain ranges, and things like that. And so he's really enjoyed that. Is an example of some of what the worksheet works look like, and they're free to download and to use. The second is Google Maps or GeoGuessr. Our children love Google Maps. They'll go and they'll take road trips on Street View, like click by click by click by click. We'd gone to Philadelphia last Labor Day, and as we were driving up over the Delaware River, my 11-year-old son goes, "Hey, I drove over this bridge last year when I was on Google Maps." And he knew exactly where we were because he had driven it himself, unbeknownst to me. We also love GeoGuessr. If no one's ever been to GeoGuessr, it's a website where they drop you somewhere in a street view, and you have to guess where you are in the world based on context clues, signs. Are they driving on the right or the left-hand side of the street? And you drop a pin on a Google map, and you get points based on how close or how far you are from that. It's a very fun game. It can get very competitive, but it can also be very collaborative, too. National Geographic Mapmaker has one-page maps that we use a lot when we go on our Great Western road trips. If you've seen my Great Western road trip map in the map gallery, we print them off for the children. This is a different one. We gave our son an assignment. He likes sports, and so we said, will you map every major sports team in the United States? And so which states have sports teams and which don't? And so that's what he did there for one of his fun assignments. Second is maps and atlases. Here's our 11-year-old. This is an old National Geographic series of all the states and provinces, and our kids, they're like huge maps. They're big wall maps, and they'll go and fold them out, and they'll spend an hour just looking at them for fun. They must be my children. We also have a lot of atlases around. World atlases, children's atlases, road atlases. On each of our road trips, we have at least 3 or 4 road atlases in the car. If anyone says, how far is it, or when are we going to get there, we just say, open up the road atlas. These are the mile markers. This is how the mile marker system works. Figure it out yourself. So you don't have to ask us. So yeah, we have at least, I don't know, however many atlases there are there, and that's probably not even all of them. And then wall maps. We have wall maps in our dining room, in our living room, just big maps up. Our son has a map up next to his bed. Maybe two of our sons do. So this is our 3 youngest children with the IMIS Geographics, the Essential Geography of the United States. That's the one in our dining room. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and what we do with it. Our kids love it. It's laminated, so it gets food and junk all over as they point to things during dinner. And so we just wipe it off, and it works great. But lots of books and games. So State Quizzers is a dinner game that we play sometimes. I'll choose a state. They have to guess which state. They have a nice binary tree formula for the quickest way to find a state. Is it east or west of the Mississippi? Does it touch a major body of water? Things like that. And so then I'll just come up with questions, cultural questions, historical questions, geographic questions about that state. They love this game. They love playing it when guests are over because it usually embarrasses the guests that the kids know more than the guests do. But I try to tailor the questions to the ability of the individual. But also just having books around. So books from little kid books, like There's a Map on My Lap, which is a fun book, and Train of States, which is a beautifully illustrated book about each state in the United States, to other books like How the States Got Their Shapes, which is a delightful book. Puzzles, so that middle puzzle on the United States is a puzzle that I've given to each of one of my siblings for Christmas, whether or not they had kids, because I said this is a fantastic puzzle. Every one of our kids have really enjoyed learning their states by doing that puzzle. We've lost states through the years and then found them in the couches, and all states are still accounted for, which I think is a miracle in and of itself. And then we encourage our children to draw their own maps. I've got a whole binder of them if you want to look at them, but a few examples. So this is our 8-year-old's, just a crazy map that he drew, but that whole top section, this is legend. This is a more realistic map of our neighborhood that our 10-year-old daughter did, which is, our children have done many different maps of their neighborhood, and this is the best one. A map of Virginia that our 11-year-old son did probably when he was 7 or 8. Another one from our 11-year-old. He loves these he's fascinated with roads. And so he's got like all the directional symbols, and every little building is named with different stores, some that he made up, some that are real. This is like what he does all the time, is make these little areas with roads and networks. You'll see these little insets. So here's the inset on the back of the page. Inset 1 and 2 are the really detailed road networks and how the highway system works in this world of his. He's even gotten into bathymetry, and so he was doing a little bathymetry thing here. But mostly, what do I want for my children to learn from all this? Do I expect them to become cartographers? No, not at all. Do I even desire? No, I don't even really desire. I don't care if they become cartographers or not. But what I want is for them to understand the interconnectedness and the visual nature of our world. Interconnectedness, that one, the understanding of place and location is really important. I've had more than one opportunity to meet somebody from a different place that I've never been, but I knew the capital city of their country, and I just said, "Oh, are you from such and such city?" And they're like, "What? You know a place in my country?" Well, I'm not going to tell you that's the only place I know in your country, but I mean, there's a sense of connectedness that really happens there. And the second is the visual nature, and going back to those critical thinking points, those are really flexible in understanding our world. Projection, understanding that when you have a data set, there's more than one way to look at it, and that we can look at it, and there are multiple realities. Scale, that there's things you can include and things you can't include when you're representing data. And then symbolization, knowing that we have to break down a lot of this data into different parts, and even the visual component of color or line weight or typeface is really important. And if they understand that, I feel like I've succeeded in some way. So thank you very much, and I'll take any questions.